Hello. So welcome to my channel. On this festive season, we are in the Christmas season. So our channel is called Skeptican because we are skeptical or we are cynical about the things that society celebrates. So today we are focusing on Christmas. So when did Christmas start? Did it begin with Jesus Christ, or did it start earlier than even Christ? So let's begin. So according to most recordings and writings, Christmas Day, that day of 25th of December, began long before Christ, in the days of Nimrod. So Nimrod's wife was called Semiramis, and she gave birth to a son called Tammuz. It is said that she gave birth to that son on 25th of December, which is winter. So very many traditions began, very many cultures, they began to worship on that day, to celebrate it, and to mark it in honor of Tammuz and Nimrod. So the picture of mother and son being worshipped didn't begin with Mary and Jesus, but began long before, long time ago in the days of Nimrod and Tammuz. So Nimrod lived after the flood, long before Abraham, long before Jacob. So many cultures, Greeks, Romans, they made versions of Tammuz and Semiramis, and they called it in different names. Greeks called it Apollo, Romans called it Jupiter and Saturnalia and Diana. So you'll find that long before Christ, Romans were worshipping Diana on that day, 25th of December. Greeks were worshipping also their own god with a different name, but the same pattern. So the pattern of Christmas Day began long ago in the days of Nimrod. It's a very old festival, very old. So after Christ came and went, because people were already celebrating that day before Christ, so a Roman emperor called Constantine decided to merge Christianity and those pagan beliefs. Because when he was an emperor in his time, Christianity was rising after the work of Paul and others. So in the Roman Empire, Christianity was the fastest rising religion. So Constantine decided to combine Christianity and those pagan beliefs. So already, that day of December was celebrated a holiday among the pagans, like I've said, because of Tammuz and Nimrod, all those. So he now decided to make that day also a day for Jesus Christ, a day for Jesus Christ's birthday, so as to combine all those pagan festivals and Christianity, and so as to unite his kingdom, to unite his empire under one belief, pagan Christianity. And that's how Christmas Day began to be celebrated as the birth of Christ, which was never the case. In fact, the apostles, like Peter, Paul, etc., they never used to celebrate Christmas. They only focused on Passover and other feasts that God ordained with Moses. So Christmas began to take root strongly among Christians after Emperor Constantine, but it was there before, since the days of Tammuz and Nimrod. Now, after Constantine, the Nords, these Scandinavians like Danish, Swedish, all those guys, in the Middle Ages, even them, they had their own version of Christianity, which is called winter solstice. You realize that Christmas Day, which is December, is a winter time in Europe. So at that time, these Nordic people, or the Vikings, they had their own celebration. And that's where the idea of Christmas tree came. At that time, people could go and get the evergreen tree, which is cypress, and they burn it in their houses, they slaughter animals, and they celebrate together. So that is what also expanded Christmas among the Europeans. So all these were all pagan festivals. And so the idea of eating, celebrating, making merry also began mostly from the Nordic. So Christianity has been a pagan festival all along. It has nothing to do with Christianity. The idea of Christ's birthday was just attached there by Constantine in order to unite his kingdom. And the Catholics took over, and then modern Christians, evangelicals also, have now adopted it. So I can say the entire world has been deceived. Now, the Greeks, like I said, after Tammuz, Tammuz lived before Abraham, after the flood. So many societies like Greeks, they named their gods with the Greek names like Apollo, etc. So you may find that with them, the one who we call Tammuz, with them they call him Apollo. So even Greeks, on this day of Christmas Day, they're already celebrating it in honor of their god, even before Christ came. Romans too, on that day of Christmas Day, even before Christ, they were celebrating it in honor of their god. And their god, one of their gods was called Jupiter, another one was called Saturnalia. So here is one of the images of Saturnalia. They were celebrating him on 25th of December. Now, Saturnalia, that name is similar to Santa Claus. In fact, you find that this face of Saturnalia, look at this face, it is very similar to the Santa Claus of modern times. So as a Christian, ask yourself, what are these things you're celebrating? Who is this Santa Claus you're celebrating? Who is this Santa Claus that you're asking your children to sit on his lap? Is it in any way biblical? Is it biblical at all? Does it have anything biblical about it? Is this Santa Claus? So look at the similarity between Santa Claus and Saturnalia. So Saturnalia is also the Roman god who Saturday was named after. And he was celebrated, he had his day on Christmas Day. And his resemblance with Santa Claus is very, you can't deny it. And also, look at the names, how similar their names are. Saturnalia and Santa Claus. Look at how they almost sound the same. That's how I'm saying that the world, and mostly Christians, have been deceived. So, also ask yourself, if Christ was born on December 25th, which is winter in Israel and most of Europe, how is it possible that the shepherds were taking care of their flock during winter? How is that possible? Can you find even grass for your flock during winter? Because during winter the earth is covered with snow. So how was it possible that the shepherds were tending their flock during winter? And then Christ was born in a manger, covered with swaddling clothes during winter. How is that possible? So it doesn't make sense. That's why you have to be skeptical about such things.
A story everyone knows. After a room refusal by a local innkeeper, Mary and Joseph bedded down in a barn in Bethlehem. The next day, Mary gave birth to a son, the Son of God. Those are the biblical origins of Christmas. But centuries before Jesus walked the earth, early Europeans were celebrating light and birth in the darkest days of winter. In the Norse country, this winter celebration was known as Yule. Around December 21st, the winter solstice, fathers and sons would drag home the biggest log they could find and set it on fire. The Yule log warmed, but it also looked ahead. Each spark was said to represent a pig or calf to be born in the spring. Also dragged inside were evergreens, the one plant that could make it through a Norse winter. Evergreens proved that life persisted in this dark time.
There's a natural attraction to that which lives through the winter when one is struggling to survive through the winter. The evergreen is that part of nature that seems impervious to the coming of winter and the diminishing of the sun. And so it's an absolutely natural symbol, one which I think you react to almost without thinking about.
For as long as the Yule log burned, about 12 days, feasting and revelry reigned supreme. In fact, this was one of the few times that meat was abundant, since cattle had just been slaughtered for the long winter.
There is a necessity to kill most of the cattle, because you can't keep them alive over the winter when we feed them on. We keep a few alive for breeding. But there is an opportunity for a great blowout, for a great feast. Time to party.
The party raged inside in defiance of winter's deadly howl.
There is a spooky feel about the northern Yuletide festivals. You may be all right there in the hall with the blazing fires, but outside there are demons, there are spirits.
In Germany, the pagan god Odin lent his name to this midwinter holiday. Early Germans were terrified of Odin, whose nocturnal flights decided who would prosper or perish in the coming year. Later, we'd see another Christmas sky rider, Santa Claus. But for now, staying inside became the smartest choice at this frightening time of the year. A 1,000 miles away in Rome, winter was less harrowing, but the December festivals were just as elaborate. 1 week before the winter solstice, Romans began celebrating Saturnalia, a month-long orgy of food and drink. Named for the god Saturn, which meant plenty, Rome's established order was turned on its head during this wild, delirious time.
The Saturnalia celebrations were certainly times of revelry, of turning the social order upside down, of having the master pretend to be the slave and the slave pretend to be the master, sort of a time out of time in which one could celebrate a kind of disorder in the universe.
One of the holiday's important feasts was Juvenalia, which celebrated the children of Rome.
Although these early festivals are not necessarily about children particularly, but they are about fertility. Children did have their particular place. The indulgence of children, of course, is very much a part of our modern Christmas, but it did have its place even in these ribald, drunken festivals that the Romans had.
Among the upper classes in Rome, solstice celebrations were significantly more sober. Many influential Romans worshipped Mithra, the god of the unconquerable sun. To this small but powerful sect, the birthday of Mithra was the holiest day of the year.
December 25th was the winter solstice in that part of the world, and it was also understood to be the birthday of the sun god, Mithra. And Mithra was said to be born from a rock. Shepherds came to worship him as he was an infant god born out in that pastoral place in the fields. And many of those stories, of course, have come into Christian tradition.
While Romans were worshiping the sun god, a new religion was taking hold throughout the empire. At first, Christians didn't celebrate the birth of Christ. His resurrection was the essential fact of the new religion. By the 4th century, however, the question of the holy birth became impossible to ignore.
Within 200 years after it began, Christianity abandoned many of the teachings of its founder, Yeshua, commonly called Jesus. Influenced by Greek and Roman paganism, Zoroastrianism, and beliefs that even go back as far as Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, Christianity turned away from most of its Hebraic foundation. Worship rituals of the sun god Sol Invictus, who was born on December 25th, were adopted in rituals common in the modern holiday of Christmas. To continue this veneration of the sun god Sol Invictus, Constantine in the year 300 imposed Sunday to replace the biblical Sabbath. Other holidays like Easter and even Halloween were adopted in favor of the original Hebraic days of worship it once honored. But the rabbit hole goes much deeper, and the church doesn't want you to know the truth. From what the Messiah looked like to the very name he was called by, what you have been taught all your life is almost entirely wrong. Minister and journalist Alan Mansager explains.
Christianity, as we know it today, started out as a Jewish faith, and it wasn't until 300 years later that Constantine started to make changes in the Sabbath, in Passover, and many of the other fundamental doctrines of Scripture.
A Christmas tree can be found in most American homes throughout the month of December. But where did this tradition come from? And how long has it been a part of the holiday tradition? In the earliest history of Scandinavia, it was traditional during the celebration of the winter solstice, December 21st, to bring an evergreen tree into the home and decorate it. Since the evergreen was the only type of tree that lived through the entire winter, the families saw it as a symbol of continued life. In the 1500s, the practice of decorating an evergreen tree at this time of year was still alive and well in northern Germany, as well as many other parts of Europe. Apples were hung as decorations, which would be an early form of Christmas ornament, and candles were used to light the trees. Other decorations included nuts, pretzels, and paper flowers. The tradition was primarily practiced on mainland Europe until the mid-1800s, when England's Queen Victoria married Prince Albert of Germany. With Albert's arrival in England, the German practice of decorating the Christmas tree quickly spread to both England and America. In less than 10 years, this had become a common practice in both countries. Traditionally, Christmas trees were brought into the home on December 24th, Christmas Eve, and decorated that evening. They were removed from the home on January 6th. It was regarded as bad luck to have a Christmas tree in the home after this date. Modern Christmas trees have kept many of these customs. However, instead of lighting trees with candles, electric lights are normally used because they last longer and are much safer.
Yes. Sasa tutafakari mambo haya. Let's think critically about this Christmas issue. If you are a Christian, ask yourself, is it biblical? Do you think there's any part in the Bible that mentions Christmas? Do you think if Paul will have come back to life today, will he celebrate Christmas with you and your family? I know most of us have inherited Christmas from our parents, and our parents too inherited it from their parents, so you can't blame them. So the entire society has been deceived. Traditions of man, the media promotes it, And it seems like every religion, they celebrate Christmas. So is it biblical? Let's think about it critically. Tutafakari mambo haya kimakini. What is it all about? These things like Santa Claus or Father Christmas, Christmas tree, Boxing Day, are they biblical? Or they're worshiping something else? Let's think about that. Yeah, that is all for now. Have a nice time with your families. Take care and be safe.